Hi everybody, it's Adam from LucidPixel, and welcome to this week's Q A. So I'll jump right into it. The first question is from Russell Fairchild. Hi Russell, yes, the guy I hate because he's got a name that's cooler than mine. Wow, dude, thank you. This helped tremendously. My pleasure. Sorry, I have another question. Another one. All right, so let's hear it. You mentioned student loans. Yes. Question of student loans. So I've made it to the point where my art is starting to look semi-professional as far as detail work, but I know my fundamentals in anatomy, color, and perspective are lacking, of course, as it is for most of us. I've been working, I'll kind of butcher up your thing a little bit because I know you're probably writing fast. I've been working in a retail job and it makes me feel like I'm wasting my time instead of going to school, but I can't do it without student loans. Do you know of a good amount or an idea of how much a student loan what's a reasonable student loan to take out, basically? What's considered too much? What's considered reasonable? I want to go to Noman, but the living expenses in the area that I live in are ridiculous, and I come from a small town, so I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it. Thank you again for helping us and putting the time into this. Well, you're welcome. All right, so there's two questions here. The first is regarding student loans and the financial side of education, and the second thing is about working in a non-art related job to pay yourself through school, essentially. So I'll address them both separately. Now, as far as student loans are concerned, okay, I have a very strong opinion about it. One which a lot of artists, a lot of public artists who talk about this kind of stuff online have also addressed and share a very similar opinion to me, okay, or I share a similar, we share a similar opinion ultimately, right? And however, as a little disclaimer on my part, I do come from Montreal. I do live in Montreal, Canada. So public education, i.e. public university, public college, public high school, all that kind of stuff is very affordable. It's not that expensive, okay? My education was not out of this world. Yet, if you look, but that's just in comparison to globally, where it can be a lot worse. Basically, Montreal might be one of the lesser of the evils, but in my opinion, it still is very expensive. Okay. Now, if you go to a trade school, let's say like a friend of mine took a 3-year course in graphic design in Montreal, and that cost him something like $50,000 or something like that, a huge amount of money, a debt which followed him for many, many years. And when I mean many years, I'm not talking about 5 years. I'm talking about 20. Okay. That means that between the ages of 25 and 45, he was still paying off his loan. That's something very important to take into account. Now, one of the major reasons that I started an online school was because in my experience in the past, and don't forget, when I studied, the internet really wasn't a thing. It didn't really exist. Okay, at least not to the extent that it was today, that it is today. It's not globally used. It's not a resource that we all use on a daily basis. Or maybe even it probably wasn't even known back then. You were pretty much saddled with the school that your local schools, or you did research and you found schools that were nearby, or if you didn't have any commitments or fears of traveling to other places, you might be able to travel. But in my particular case, that wasn't the case. I was in Montreal, and at the same time that I was looking for colleges, or in Montreal they're called CEGEPs, okay? At the same time I was looking for colleges in Montreal, I was about to be a new dad. Okay, I found out that I was going to be a dad, so I decided I was thinking about going to Toronto, but then I decided I was going to study in a college called Sheridan College because I wanted to study classical animation. But when I found out that I was going to be a dad, I stayed in Montreal. Okay, so my circumstances and my personal decisions as a parent were to stay with my kid, right? So that from the whole, as far as shopping around is concerned, that limited my options. But in reality, there weren't that many options. It wasn't really a big deal. It wasn't a big like, oh, I'm giving up on my life type of thing. That's really kind of how it works, right? Unless you have the money to travel and to relocate and to afford an expensive college, that's really not an option for you, right? So I stayed in Montreal. And that I went to Concordia University. That's where I studied classical animation. Okay, now it was less expensive than a lot of other places around the world, but it was still expensive. But if you go into certain countries, very often just to get a regular college or university education easily costs into the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, and in my personal opinion, that's wrong. I'm going to be very blunt about it. I think that's just absolutely wrong. not only is it wrong, globally speaking, but as an artist, the reality of working as an artist, it takes time to make a living out of it. Now with gaming, in the gaming industry, in the film industry, in the special effects industry, you can make a much faster living. Like when I was working in video games, I was working in 3D, there definitely was more options, more opportunity for work for me, right? But it can be a very slow climb, and depending on the economy, which we know our economy worldwide right now is not doing very well, jobs can come and go very easily. So the idea of saddling somebody with a $50,000 school loan, a $10,000 school loan, let's not even talk about 50, let's just talk about $10,000, is a loan, is a debt that you might have to pay for decades. So think about it. Just do the math there. If you're going to college, you're probably in your early 20s. That means that debt that you've just committed to is going to continue to, you're going to be still paying it in your 40s. Okay? That should put a little bit of something into perspective. And my personal opinion is, how could you put that kind of a debt on somebody at a point where they just don't have the financial means at all? They're students. Students don't have it. At most, untrained labor, you're making minimum wage, or maybe a little bit more, depending on where you're working. And maybe you have rent to pay, and maybe you have kids. Like the reality of life kicks in, and you realize, I'm going to be paying off nothing but interest for God knows how long. That debt can follow me for the rest of my life. Okay? That's scary. My personal opinion when it comes to, financial loans, when it comes to credit card companies, is I don't like them. And one of the things that really hit home for me was, I remember I went back to my old college, Dawson, to meet up with an old professor. At this point I was a teacher, and I was actually going to meet up with another teacher. And I walk in through the front lobby, and right there in the front lobby is somebody sitting down representing some bank, I guess, signing out applications for credit cards for students right there in the school lobby. And I saw this, and when it dawned on me what I was looking at, I just turned red. I was like, what kind of corruption is this? That they're handing out credit cards to students. I'm like sitting there going, that's disgustingly corrupt. Yet they're allowed to do it, right? And I don't have a very fond opinion of the financial industry, really, to be completely honest with you. A lot of it is corruption. A lot of them know that they're going to be making a ton off of you for the next 20 years because you're young, you need the money, you wanted to get a new Cintiq, you wanted to get a new PS4, whatever the case might be, and they go, here's $20,000, have fun, and they just give it to you, and you spend it, and you don't realize you're going to be paying that back for maybe the rest of your life. And that's stressful, and if you can't afford to pay it because you don't have the money for it, then your credit rating starts to drop. You want to take out a loan for a house, forget it. You want to take out a loan for a car, forget it. It ruins you financially, and it happens all the time. So if you've already been through what a lot of people have been through, and you do have that debt, well, then we have to work hard to pay it off, and that's just the reality of it. Some of us can't. A lot of people are declaring bankruptcy, and that's why banks are starting to panic right now, because people are just declaring bankruptcy because they just simply can't afford to pay it off because the economy's in bad shape. Okay, so fuck the banks, in my opinion. But no, well, I don't want to encourage you to make bad decisions, but that's the reality of it. But if you're young and you're sitting there like Russell right now, contemplating school loans, my personal opinion is, if you don't have a parent or you don't have the immediate finances to be able to afford it, explore your options. Because you have options today that are a tiny fraction of the cost, that will give you the same quality education, if not better, okay? Then you're going to get into some school. The schools that I went to when I studied in college, the fine arts degree that I got was good. It was good. Classical animation, it was a complete fucking waste of my time. Complete and utter waste of my time. It was not the right type of education. I was very classical commercial animation. That was my interest. But in Montreal, they only offered, at least at Concordia, it was very Canadian film board stuff, which in my personal opinion, it's not my taste. A lot of people love it, but it's not me, right? So I really, really did not benefit from that education. The only thing I benefited from was learning some of the old. I learned how to, how to set up an Oxbury camera. I learned how to use a Steinbeck machine to do audio, to sync audio and video. Essentially, something that within the next 2 years was completely obsolete because we ended up going digital, right? So that was pretty much a complete waste of time and money. Okay, in my opinion, I really didn't get anything out of it. My real education started when I started working professionally. That was really it. And the only reason I got a job working professionally was because I could say I studied classical animation, and that got me in the door. And actually, I didn't finish my university degree. I ended up getting a job in animation, working for a game studio, and just decided that that's where I'm learning. So why waste any more time and money in a school? So that's what I ended up doing. Again, I'm not encouraging you to drop out of school, but I was weighing my options, and one was giving me what I needed more than the other, and one was paying me and one wasn't. So, it was a bit of a no-brainer for me. So what does that mean? Well, I started my online school. I started LucidPixel. Chris Oatley has the Oatley Academy. Noah Bradley has his mentorship. Darkin has a mentorship. Tyler Edlin has a mentorship. Matt Core has, I don't know if he has a mentorship, but he's got a huge online resource at Control Paint. I mean, there's options everywhere. There's more expensive options, less expensive options, depending on what you're going for, okay? Depending on what you can afford. But explore those options. And furthermore, you have the power to be able to pick the teacher that has the style and the focus and the career direction that matches you. Remember, there is a very big distinction between one type of artist and another type of artist, right? One is a designer who's good at making, three-dimensional objects, good at rendering out three-dimensional forms, but isn't necessarily an artistic type. He's not a visual storyteller per se, but he's very good at getting things fast and fleshing out designs, and he's done a lot of research in that particular regard. Other people are excellent, classical painters. Other people are very good visual storytellers. So every different teacher, every different mentorship, school, institution, whatever case might be, has their own strengths and specialties. You can go and pick and choose, and you can sit there behind your desk and you don't have to go anywhere. You can still take care of your kids. It's an education that has a very flexible schedule around you, right? If you can only study in the evenings, study in the evenings. If you can only study during the day, study during the day. If you've got 3 kids at home to take care of them. And you're not pumping that money out into some corrupt credit card company. You're keeping that money for yourself and for your kids and for your future. You can invest, if you've just saved up $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 for an education, and you're sitting there wondering enough to go to school, don't spend that money yet. Weigh your options first. If you find that the school is the right environment for you, go for it. If you find that it's out of your means, or there's better things you can do with your money and you can get a more specified education, save the money. Okay? Invest that into maybe your future home. Invest it into a car. Invest it into lots of other things you can do. Don't waste that money on a credit card company. Okay? That's my personal, very, very strong opinion. And that's a very strong incentive of why I wanted to start an online school in the first place. Okay? But if you are in a country where education is free, an education that pays you, or it's very affordable and inexpensive, cool. Then you don't have that issue. Okay, but most people do have that issue, and I personally don't think that a credit card company should have any claim on you whatsoever. I think you should have complete control over your own life. Now, the second part of Russell's question is, or at least the issue that he was talking about, is about doing non-artistic jobs, especially earlier on in your life. I'm going to elaborate that on, say, non-artistic jobs early on in your life and later on in your life when you're already a professional. Remember, with an unstable economy, an unstable work environment, and that doesn't only apply to artwork. That applies to programming. That applies to engineering. That applies to to law, to anything. Okay, an economy affects everybody. Okay, bad economy affects everybody. Nobody is scot-free from a bad economy. Okay, unless maybe an economist. Somebody who studies who makes money studying the economy. But my very strong opinion about that is some of the most valuable professional skills I ever learned in my career is that were as important to my professional ability, my abilities, didn't only come from art. They came from non-art jobs as well. When I was studying in school, I was studying, while I was studying both in college and university, I was working full-time at the same time, or part-time, depending. And I did a lot of waiting jobs. I worked at, Three Amigos. I worked at Cine Express. I worked at all these cafe bistros and restaurants. I worked on Crescent Street. I worked, down in the middle of downtown. I did a lot of different waiting jobs. I worked in phone customer service. I worked for Phonarola, and at the time I was at Phonarola, that ended up being bought up by Sprint. So half of it was for Phonarola, and then the second half of the time I was there was working for Sprint. Did I do anything else? I worked in an arcade. I worked in an arcade called L'Enjeu, which was an arcade at Alexis Neon Plaza, for any of you Montrealers paying attention. And I did all of those jobs. And in every single one of those jobs, I had a chance to explore and develop skills that I wouldn't have otherwise. Working in phone customer service was excellent for professional communication and conflict management, because half of the people that I would get a call from, phone customer service, half of the people that would call me were already furious. It was their 9th call. They were fed up. I would pick up the phone and go, "Hi, this is Adam Duff from Sprint Customer Service. How may I help you today?" Or we had the headset, right? I wasn't actually physically holding a phone. Okay, I didn't do this back in the 70s. But, with the block phone, yes, dear, the rotary phone. But I would have people go, yeah, okay, yeah, I know, Sprint Canada, that's great. Listen, I've been calling 15 times. Got this charge. I got a $600 charge on my phone. I didn't even make any long distance phone calls. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And I had to calm them down and find a solution. So I learned the art of conflict management and how to bring people down and how to calm them back down and how to realign people and how to get everything working better. I actually got pretty good at it, right? But I ended up getting sacked because I was 5 minutes late coming back from my lunch break because we'd have to time it on our phone. So you're lost, Sprint. But I learned a lot of valuable skills about conflict management. Working as a waiter, breaking the ice, socializing. You're in excellent shape because you're on your feet all the time, carrying stuff in and out of a kitchen, right? I was in great shape when I was working as a waiter. You're in a hot kitchen, so you're sweating all day and everything like that. You come home, you take a nice shower, you stink of food, and you take a nice shower and you feel nice and refreshed. I met lots of people, and where I was waiting, I was actually physically working between Concordia University and Dawson College, the two places that I studied. I was right in the epicenter between the two, so all the people that came in. I was working at a place called Cine Express. Everybody that came in were all students. So I got to know like half of the people in these schools. I got to know a lot of people, right? So it was wonderful for that. Everything that I did contributed to my career in one way or another. Nothing was a waste of time. Now the second half of this is, so if you're working to pay yourself through school, awesome. You're probably going to develop skills that you're not going to develop sitting behind a computer drawing all day. You need to get out and socialize sometimes. It's good for you, So when you sit down for a job interview, you're very good at breaking the ice with the people that you're having a job interview with. If you have a conflict, if you're having a conflict with one of your colleagues, you learn how to be able to communicate it in a diplomatic way so that you find a solution quickly and everybody's happy and they're singing and dancing and much rejoicing. Now the second half is, what about if you're older? What if you've been a senior artist and you've worked on this AAA game and that AAA game and that big budget film and that big budget film, and you've been a Mr. Fancy and you made a 6-figure salary and and you've done all this fancy stuff, but now you can't find work. The economy sucks. You're overqualified for most of the jobs out there. You're asking, people think you're expecting too much. You have bills to pay too. Okay? This is actually a harder situation than when you're in school. Because when you're in school, well, you're in school. So, whatever job you can get, great. But when you're older, when you've already gained experience, when you're already made it over that, what you call a hump, and you've become a professional, it can be, your pride can kick in. And it can be a very difficult psychological kick to the nuts to think of the prospect of doing some untrained job, going back to customer service, working as a waiter, okay? And what I want to tell you is, don't let pride dictate your life. If you've got bills to pay, if you've got kids to take care of, get whatever job you can get if you need to. If there's no jobs out there, if there's no work, be a waiter. You'll love it, okay? A very good example is one of the grocery stores I very often shop at. It was funny. I'm going through the cash, And there's this one guy working at the cash, and I recognized him from somewhere. And he was super, super, you know, a lot of cashiers like, yeah, next, yeah, next, meh. Yes, have a nice day. You know, do you have the Air Club? Yeah, do you have the Air Miles card? No, thank you. All right, next. You know, he was sociable. He was friendly. He smiled at my kids. He was chatty. He gave my kids a sticker. Super nice guy. And I'm looking at him going, where the hell do I know you from? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, did you work anywhere else? He goes, yeah, well, I was a teacher. I was an art teacher. I'm like, he was my freaking teacher. Okay, this guy was my teacher. I was like, you're an amazing teacher. I remembered him, and you know, I remembered him back in college and everything. I was like, holy shit. He was happy. He was sociable. He was loving his job. He was working as a cashier. Did I have to ask him why he was working as a cashier? No. Oh shit, you're a teacher. Oh, it's tough luck for you. You're having to. No, I didn't even think about that for 2 seconds. I was happy to see him. He was still a great art teacher in my eyes. He was just somebody who couldn't find work teaching, or you know, was having a hard time finding other work, so he was doing this in the meantime to pay the bills. Good. It showed strength of character. It showed the fact that this guy wasn't too proud to take a step back. And sometimes in life, it's important to take a step back. You got to get off your high horse. You can't be a slave to your title, okay? You can't. In any walk of life, don't be a slave to your title. Your good vibe, your good energy, your professional attitude, your contribution to the world around you is going to be equally valuable whether you're doing it through art or anything else, okay? So don't be afraid of that reality. We all have to go through it sometimes, okay? So hopefully this answers your question, Russell, and a little bit more. All right, our next question comes from Phantom0100. I like that name. That's cool. Phantom0100. I don't know why I had to say it with like an Asian accent or something. I've always been scared of the legalities behind professional work. Yeah, I could really use this. I could really use this. Yes, you cleared up what I should be doing now. I'm everywhere with my learning. I need a reliable process. Thank you again, Adam. Okay, so legalities. Legalities are designed to be scary. One of a very good TED talk that I heard once was a guy talking about legal contracts and legalities and stuff like that. I'd have to track it down to tell you who did it. But essentially, what he was talking about was how very often, I might sound very anti-government in here. That's not my opinion, but I do definitely have problem with facets of the government. And that facet is a very large and greater percentage of government, but yeah, it's very often, one of the things that this guy in the TED Talk was talking about was, that in many cases, legal contracts, legal proceedings, all of these things are designed to be ambiguous and complicated. They're designed to make you not want to bother. Right? They're designed to make you go, oh, forget this. It's too much trouble. Okay. And that's very often because you feel that way because it was designed for you to feel that way. All right. A perfect example. The example the guy in the TED Talk was using was he was talking about how, they were building something new in the city that could be very controversial to the people that were living there because it was very intrusive on that particular neighborhood. So they were supposedly offering a means for people to communicate. They were going to have a town meeting or something like that, or you can contact us via this message. But the way they designed the pamphlet, this whole legal pamphlet document, was tons and tons of paragraphs and very text heavy, which for a lot of people, if something is extremely text heavy, it exhausts people. People don't want to do that, right? Especially in today's day and age where people are used to short comments and quick information or videos more often, right? So it was very text heavy, and down at the bottom in very small print was, to contact this, like you'll never find it. You'd have to filter through this haystack of stuff. Very often legalities are designed, contracts, NDAs, work contracts, different legalities depending on the type of work that you're doing, copyright law, all of this different stuff can, on the surface, and very often is, designed to look and feel complicated for the sake of keeping you uninformed and keeping you in the blind so that whoever can take advantage of that. That's why, and I'm going to repeat, this is something I mentioned in my last, I think it was my last Q&A, I'm going to mention it again. That's why places like ArtPact, okay, ARTPACT, okay, go check it out, okay. That's why places like ArtPact are so hugely valuable, because what they do is they created a meeting spot for all the people you need to speak to regarding getting legal information, getting professional education, knowing what kinds of stuff you need in the industry, all that kind of stuff. Extremely, extremely valuable stuff. And it's designed and written in a way to not be ambiguous, to not be complicated, so that you can read through a legal contract and go, okay, you can look for exactly what points are important, and you can scan over something in 2 minutes and be able to get a good mental summary of what you're looking at. Instead of going, oh, Jesus, paragraph 1, paragraph 267, paragraph 445, you're sitting there going, oh my God, you know? That's why nobody ever reads the terms of agreement. And that's why a lot of new companies, as a PR move, are saying we've made our terms of agreement very simple. They've made it 3 paragraphs, right? Because before they used to be 45 pages. Why? Because they don't want anybody to read it. That's why. They know you're just going to go skip, 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 accept, right? So places like ArtPact are extremely valuable for that, and I really strongly recommend that you join up. And you can join for free. You can get a lot of the stuff that you need for free, but if you're really looking for exclusive content, it's very cheap. I mentioned that last week as well. Okay? So that's extremely valuable, but it's very important that you do. Why? I'm gonna one of the things that I learned in my career that I think any artist on earth, whether they worked in a studio or whether they worked freelance, but especially if you work freelance, have run into, and that is, if you don't know your rights, you're gonna get made. Somebody's gonna take advantage of you. Somebody's gonna screw you over. It's gonna happen. You know, you're young. You're an amateur. You don't know anything about the law. You don't know anything about that, and you agree to it. And the guy you're talking to on the phone says, "Yeah, don't worry about contracts. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. Your money's good." You know, and they say that to you. You know. If you've worked for that guy 3 or 4 times already, yeah, sometimes in some cases I'm not going to get all caught up in the legality. We'll sign a quick contract, you know, and stuff like that. Same standard contract we've been through before. I'm not going to worry about it too much at that point. But if I'm working for a new client, it's not a question. I don't care if you're my next door neighbor. I don't care if you're my girlfriend's boss. I don't care if you're, you know, my best friend. Work is work, and if we're gonna have a working contract together, there's a working contract, okay? And that contract, depending on the type of work, has certain very important stipulations. A very good example is, you know, and a lot of artists talk about, you know, working for free or working for absolute garbage money. You're looking at an ad for somebody who's looking for a freelance illustrator for a book, you know, somebody wants a children's book illustrated. And they tell you, on the surface, they say it's, you know, 10 to 20 pages of work or a 30-page book or whatever, and they're offering $300, okay? Even $500. And you go, woo, that's good money. You think it's good money because you haven't done the math yet. And furthermore, they're offering you $500, and that is kind of a legally binding thing. If you agree to that, you're agreeing to $500. If you realize you've been screwed after, ain't nothing you can do about it because you signed away to $500. Now you owe them that work, right? And if you don't do it, you don't get the $500. So what ends up happening is, you know, you think, okay, 20 pages, maybe I can do a page a day, so that I can do the math. But then you don't realize. Then they ask you for fixes and reiterations and redesigns and this and that and reformat. Oh, maybe the book needs to be formatted. I worked on one book that had to be formatted in 20 different ways. So we spent about a week finding a way to design this artwork so that it could fit on multiple different formats. I wasn't going to redraw everything 20 different times, but like this, 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 okay? Like tons of different types of formats for books. That's a lot of work and a lot of time spent doing it, okay? If you agree to $500 and you do the math and you look at, if you actually think about all of the parts, all of the different facets of producing a book that goes into it, you realize that in the end you're making about 4 cents an hour. Doesn't sound so good anymore, does it? No. And it's 4 cents an hour. It was a huge headache. It took months out of your time, and that $500, gone. You spent that on a single grocery. Gone. You know, maybe it sustained you for 2 weeks worth of groceries. That's it. Okay, now you're out of 500 bucks, but you still got another month and a half of work for this schmuck. Okay, so that kind of stuff is stuff you have to know. Okay, furthermore, it's a lump sum, no royalty. You just busted your balls working around the clock to make a beautiful book, your artwork, which is going to sell thousands and thousands of copies of that book for them. They're laughing all the way to the bank. You got your puny 4 cents an hour in the end, and they're making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars off of your art, because your art is the reason they bought the book in the first place. It's a children's book. Children don't give a crap about what's written in the book. Okay? They like the pictures. Okay? So if your artwork is the book, all right? You have the author who did the writing, you have the artist that did the picture, and if it wasn't for the picture, that book would never sell. That's why they hired you in the first place. But you accepted your 500 bucks and that's it. Okay? So, for me, I know, for instance, as far as the production of the book, there's 2 different ways I've done it. One is for a substantial amount of money. I did that once and I regretted it. Why? Because they're still making money off of that book and I haven't made a penny. So the second time I was around, the author who contacted me for that book said, Adam, it's 50-50. Okay? I wrote it for free. You're going to draw it for free, but all of the revenue that comes into it, we're splitting halfway, just between you and me. Okay? And of course, the publisher gets a big cut of that too, right? But I knew that once the book was produced, it would keep generating money. I would get a check in the mail, on a quarterly basis. Every 3 months I would get a check in the mail for a book I produced, and we both get an equal amount. So we made an equal contribution, we got equal amount back. Okay? That's how you want to go about that stuff. But if you don't know your legalities, you go on a place like elance.com, which, by the way, if you're as a freelancer, I've done a few contracts for Elance. It took me forever to find anybody that was willing to pay a decent amount, but the exploitation that goes on that site, in my personal opinion, is horrendous. People who are looking for huge amounts of work and they're offering like nothing. And because inexperienced artists are so desperate very often, that they're all professionals, seasoned, like people who have real professional looking portfolios that are going and accepting working for absolute garbage. It is thievery. So avoid places like that. And if you're going to work for somebody, if it's not under the right terms, then you just say thank you, but no thank you, and you move on to the next gig. You don't want to be exploited by any stretch of the imagination. So when it comes to legalities, learn them. It's worthwhile. It's like learning anatomy. You can spend your whole life not really learning anatomy properly, and you can spend 10 years drawing wrong. But if you buckle down and spend a couple of weeks learning it properly, now you're going to benefit from it for the rest of your life. So buckle down, spend a couple of days, spend a couple of weeks learning about the legalities, learning about different types of contracts for different type of work, learn about the legalities behind royalties, how you copyright your work, how you protect your work from being stolen, how do you renew copyright of something if necessary. All of these different legalities, learn them. And ArtPact is a wonderful one-stop shop for that kind of stuff. All right? All right, our next question comes from Jihad Williams, and he writes, Adam, thank you a lot for what you do for the art community as well as myself. You're welcome. I have a question. What are you using to do the demons? He's talking about the demons. You can go check it out on my YouTube channel, a series of demons character designs. Do I use a tablet or a Cintiq? That's a good question. For 99.9% of my work, I use my trusty old Intuos 4. We've been on, this is my baby. We've been through many an adventure together. I've had this for years. It works as good as it does today as it did before. It's just, a little worn, a little dusty, but, I love this thing. And it's a medium size. I don't like the small tablets or the big ones. I don't even know if they sell those anymore. This is like the medium size. It's perfect for my desk. But I absolutely love this piece of equipment. I worked at school. The reason why I haven't bought any others, I'll tell you exactly why I haven't gotten a Cintiq or I haven't gotten the newer Intuos. At my school, I teach on an Intuos Pro, which has the touch sensitivity, which is complete garbage. It's useless. Don't waste your money on anything with touch sensitivity by Wacom. I'm sorry, Wacom, man. You make beautiful equipment, but your touch sensitivity is just an annoying pain in the ass. There's no purpose anyways. With your keyboard shortcuts, you can navigate super quickly. It's like playing a video game. Everything becomes very second nature to you. You don't need that crap, okay? You really don't need it. Furthermore, I'm teaching a lesson, and because I haven't disabled the touch sensitivity, every time my arm would brush over it, my screen would wig out, right? And I'd end up pressing the button and disabling it. I always disabled it. I never got any use out of touch sensitivity. And the pressure sensitivity between the 4 and the 5, the Intuos 4 and the 5, is really so minor. It really doesn't make a difference. It really, honest to God, doesn't make a scratch bit of difference. It's a gimmick, you know? It's newer. That's it. And I don't even prefer the look of the Intuos Pro. I personally prefer the look and the feel of the Intuos 4. I've never used my express keys at all on this thing, ever. I use it as a drawing tablet, period, right? All those little buttons and doohickeys, I never get any use of. I set them all to things like flip canvas and toggle and shift, and never use them. I use my keyboard for everything. And I've had the option of doing otherwise, and I don't. You know, it's just useless to me. When I was working on the Disney show in Ottawa, we all worked on Cintiqs, and the one I had at work was the 22 HD. I actually had the 22 at first, and then the 22 HD. Oh, they're wonderful. You know, they're very nice to draw on, but did it make me a better artist? Not by any stretch of the imagination. A Cintiq is, I think the artists that get the most use out of a Cintiq are line artists, because the layout in an animation studio, the layout department are the ones that do the line work, and then I was the background supervisor, so we did all of the background coloring. Okay. When it comes to color work, I personally prefer working on an Intuos. When it comes to line work, control of hand and quick movements, I found it did speed me up a little bit because it's more hands-on, right? You naturally approach it more like you would do with a natural, with, you know, a pencil and paper type of thing, or with a paintbrush. But coloring wise, I found I enjoyed the look and the feel of working on a Cintiq, but it did not improve my artwork by any stretch of the imagination. It's the same thing. Drawing is drawing, right? You adapt to one or the other. I actually was a bit annoyed about the fact that with the Cintiq, you're sitting with the Cintiq right in front of you, that I have to reach under, in the 22 HD at least, that I had to reach under my Cintiq for my keyboard, because I can't do anything without my keyboard. I need my keyboard. That's my baby. You know, that's where I work quickly and intuitively on a keyboard. A lot of people working in the Cintiq, going into menus to me I find it's an inconvenience. You know, a menu or this kind of thing. I like to work fast with my fingers without thinking about it, right? It's like, imagine playing a video game and having to go into menus while you're playing your game. Like, it'll drive you nuts. You just want to press those keys. So that was a little bit of an annoyance for me. However, the Cintiq that I am going to be getting is going to be the 24 HD, okay? Why? Because it comes with the stand. And to me, drawing, this is a comfortable, it's facing me, and I would pull it right off my table, and this is a comfortable way to draw. I did not like the 22 because I'm like this. Bad for your back, bad for your neck, bad for your shoulder. I started getting pinched nerves in my shoulder because your arm is always elevated to draw, right? Because the 22, the stand on the 22 goes down or up, right? But it sits on your desk, where the 24 has the stand you can bring down, okay? Now the new 27 QHD, the brand new one that came out, I haven't really tested it. I would say the advantage of the QHD is the fact that it's an LED screen, which makes it a lot lighter, okay? A lot lighter. The 24 HD is extremely heavy. My table is glass. So I've always been a little bit concerned if I put a really heavy 24 on this, I'm concerned. It's thick glass. I mean, it's like half an inch thick, but I'm still worried, you know, about breaking it or whatever the case might be. So I ideally would, you know, if I got the 27, the problem with the 27, if you didn't know already, is that I'm not personally impressed with Wacom for this, is the fact that they don't sell it with the adjustable stand. All you have is two little kickstands for the back of it. You have to buy the adjustable stands separately, which I don't agree with that. You know, we expect we expect something. You've sold it with the stands before. You know everybody needs it, so frickin' sell it with the thing. This kickstand crap, I'm not a big fan of. What does that mean? That if it's just a kickstand, that means you're leaning forward over your desk. And if you've been working in the industry long enough, if you've been painting digitally for as long as I have, you'll very much agree with the fact that bad sitting habits have very bad effects on you. You know, pains in your legs, pains in your neck, pains in your shoulders, pains in your lower back. All of these things from poor posture. So that's why I got a nice, you know, it's not expensive. I guess it's like a $300 chair, but it's you know, it's orthographic, not orthographic. It's you know, it's ergonomic. An ergonomic chair. It's got nice padding on the seat, adjustable arms, adjustable back, all adjustable tilt. So when I'm sitting straight and I'm looking straight. But I used to draw like this because I was sitting on a regular chair and my back would end up going after a little while, and that ended up causing a lot of problems. So the very fact that with a Cintiq where you have to lean over something, I hate that. You know, I wouldn't buy it for that. I wouldn't buy it unless I could get the stand with it. So my personal one would be the 24 HD, not the 24 HD Touch, because the touch feature again is something you're going to get zero use out of. And what I would do is I would bring the thing down and I'd have my keyboard like this, so I'm sitting in a comfortable way and I'm drawing like this. My arms are down. I'm not propped up because that messes up your shoulders. But it's a nice piece of equipment. It does not make you a better artist. I remember walking to a guitar shop once and I was looking for an inexpensive guitar for my daughter, right? Because it was her first guitar. I'm not going to get her I'm not going to get her a Fender, you know. But like, the guy takes it. This guy named Oren who worked at the music store, and he comes and takes it. He goes, "This one's good, man," you know. And it goes like this, and he plays this like super sexy guitar riff. I'm like, "Woo, that sounds awesome," you know. It sounded awesome because he was a good musician. It's the same thing for art. You know, I picked it up. I came home, ding, ding. Sounds like shit. Why? Because I was a shit musician at the time. I didn't know any better, you know. But now my daughter is making beautiful music with it. But it's the same thing with equipment, right? You don't need an expensive piece of equipment to do great art. You need to have a great brain. You have to be trained. You have to know what you're drawing. Art translates into any piece of equipment that you use. So if you think that buying a Cintiq is going to make you a better artist, it's not. It's just expensive and it looks pretty. It looks nice when you can pose nude on it, you know, for your Facebook profile, that kind of thing. All right? Our next question is from, or at least this topic is from Marta Akerman. It was actually an excerpt from a conversation that was going on my forums where she was offering feedback to another artist, and really good stuff too. And this is actually something she wrote a while ago. It was 7 months ago that she actually wrote this. But I really thought it had a lot of valuable topics in it to talk about. So what she says is, sorry to butt into the discussion, but I don't think there's ever a point where an aspiring artist needs to stop watching video tutorials. I'm a film major, and when I'm making a short film or illustrating concepts, I find myself always referring back to video tutorials to A, remind myself to keep track of basic fundamentals, or B, insert a level of objectivity into my work. I also think that you fear your lack of I also don't think that you fear your lack of skill, but more that you have the preconceived notion that pros need to have some kind of vast mental visual library that they can use without a video tutorial. Hope that helps. Really good stuff. And this is kind of a two-part topic, but one that I wanted to elaborate on as well. Video tutorials. This has become a more and more popular thing in recent years. But when I first started making video tutorials, e-commerce sites like Sells and Gumroad, the most popular one is Gumroad, at least today, didn't really exist. We didn't really have kind of a hub for video tutorials. What I ended up using was I signed up for about maybe a little bit over a year, if not longer, with an e-commerce site called Shopify, which is a very good site. I think they're from Ottawa, and Ottawans are very good at, you know, good business and stuff like that. They're very honest businessmen, as far as I know, and or business people. But at the time, there weren't a lot of people that did it. You know, there were a couple of artists that I knew that made online video tutorials. It's something I really liked, so I wanted to produce my own. But it was a monthly fee, so there was always a charge. You know, I was always being charged a monthly fee for the site. I had to upkeep it. I had to kind of design and do everything myself. And to me, I found at a certain point it was something that the ends didn't necessarily justify the means for me. There wasn't a set template on prices, so I kind of would give it whatever price I thought was reasonable. And it was always a very kind of an ambiguous thing from my end. of it. But then later on, Gumroad came into the picture, and it very quickly became kind of this hub for artists to sell digital tutorials, right? So hundreds and hundreds of artists started to jump onto this trend. And what it did is it created a kind of a one-stop shop, a place to go where you could research many different artists and pick the tutorials that you liked. Furthermore, a set pricing template started to fall into place. And depending on the general rule, if you're looking to do your own Gumroads as well, from what I've seen and what I've experienced, depending on the length and the length and complexity of the tutorial, generally would range from anywhere from 5 to like maximum really like $20 for the regular tutorial, usually 5 to 12. And if you kind of did the math, it was a bit of a $1 per hour, right? So if you had like a 6-hour tutorial, it would be $6 type of idea, you know? But it was kind of, most of them, the majority would range around the $5 mark, okay? Which is almost it's like an impulse buy for most people. They don't think $5 is you don't really think of that, right? $5 isn't really a significant amount of money. Furthermore, if you've got like 15, $20 of extra cash you want to splurge, you just go and you can purchase 20 hours worth of video tutorials. It's good money because it's worthy investment because you're paying to learn. You're paying to improve your skills artistically, right? So it's not just wasteful money. So I ended up, of course, joining in that whole Gumroad thing as well. And the advantage of that was the fact that I just put my video tutorials there and I don't have to worry about it. You know, I don't have to upkeep it. I don't have to, you know, there's no monthly subscription. They just take a percentage from whatever sales I make, right? So it's a very, you know, it's something that you can just have on the side. Why do I buy tutorials? Why do I have them? Why do I produce them? What do I find are the major benefits? Now, Marta already mentioned two big ones, and that is to give yourself a chance to reflect on your own work and see how you can be more objective about it, how you can improve it. Secondly is, she said, to remind you of the basic fundamentals. Again, as artists, we can get so caught up in different techniques and different this and that every now and then I've learned through experience, every time I start to get kind of caught up in the whole complexity headspace and things would start to get very, very confusing for me, coming back to the basic fundamentals has always been how I got myself back, right? And when you watch an artist who's producing these tutorials, very often what ends up happening, this has happened for me a couple of times, where I would produce one or two paintings that didn't quite succeed. I wouldn't put those up on Gumroad. I would have to kind of find that one where I started on the right foot and it translated into a very good piece of artwork, right? So, but I had to do about 2 or 3 to kind of get myself in the right headspace. So what you're getting is you're getting an artist who's grounded themselves, and that's what they made a video tutorial out of, at least in most cases, right? So it brings you back to the fundamentals. But I also have other reasons why I like to watch tutorials. One is as a companion while I'm painting, kind of a painting buddy, right? When I'm painting, I'm usually listening to these while I'm working on my own artwork. So for me, listening to music sometimes isn't always an option for me. Sometimes if I'm listening to music, sometimes it can be distracting. It can pull me into a certain mood that has a little bit too much influence on my work. Sometimes, not always, but it can do that. Watching documentaries or having Netflix, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of distraction going on. But when there's another artist I just let the video play in the background. I might not even have the video up on my screen. It might be minimized, right? But I'm listening to another artist talk about art while I'm painting. Keeps me in that art headspace without distracting me, without pulling me away from my vision, right? So that's one of the things that I always found very valuable about that is, you've got 6 hours worth of dialogue about art just going on in the background, And every now and then I'll glance over to see the progress if I haven't seen the painting, the finished product of the painting, or there's a part of the painting that there was a technique I like. I have that voice going on. So I generally tend to lean more towards artists that are very verbal about their art. They don't just kind of play music and just paint, for 4 hours. I like to actually hear people talk. The other thing is, because they're so inexpensive, because it doesn't cost me like $50 a tutorial, for me, I'm not worried about I'm not necessarily looking for a way to paint from scratch. But because if I purchase enough of them, every now and then I'll go, ooh, there's something about their technique, there's something about their approach that I liked. Something that I can easily pluck out, and a technique I can apply to my own toolkit. If you've heard some of my earlier videos, I talk about your own toolkit, your professional toolkit, the techniques that you use to produce professional work, okay? And I'll go, ooh, that would work with what I do, right? That could help me be more productive with something that I already do. So out of like 7 hours worth of tutorials, I might get one little thing out of it, but that one little thing will help me in the long run. It'll help me push the quality of my work, okay? Furthermore, when I do purchase tutorials, I'm not purchasing a tutorial from somebody who does something completely foreign to me. At this point in my career, I'm not looking to reinvent myself. I'm just looking to enhance what I already do, right? To build on my foundation. So when I do get tutorials, I get tutorials from artists that I can relate to personally, right? Artists that do this, the kind of stuff that gels with what I do. So that when they do communicate art, when I'm more likely to hear things, I might be more likely to learn things that I can apply immediately to my work, versus sitting there going, okay, well, forget everything I've done for the last 15 years. Let's start from scratch. Every now and then I like to challenge myself with something different and get experimental with stuff. In that case, I'll get something else. But that's generally why I get these tutorials, as for the company, for the dialogue, and to see if there's any little things, little tidbits I can get out of it. If I don't, it's $5 worth of very good entertainment and great art. Otherwise, I'm getting a little bit extra from it, right? I'm not expecting to become a new reborn artist for $5. It doesn't work that way, you know? From a 6-hour tutorial, you're not going to get that, right? But that's really the big thing that I find, and it's a very small, it's a very easy investment on your part, right? Now the second is the whole thing about visual library. And this is a topic that I believe I've spoken. I know I talk about this with my students a lot, but I don't. But I'm trying to reflect back if I've ever actually spoken about this in past video tutorials on YouTube or anything like that. But this is something that a lot of artists have a bit of a misconception, and sometimes for valid reason, because sometimes certain artists online paint a bit of a misleading image of what a visual library is. Very often certain artists might, you know, not because they're malicious, just because, you know, that's the way they communicate, but they kind of describe it as being, you know, if you've experienced enough of life and you've seen enough things and you have a perfect photographic memory, then you know, you have this advanced brain, i.e. visual library, that you can tap into. You know, you can tap into your own genius to be able to produce great artwork. That's not entirely true, okay? There is a bit of truth in that, because yes, naturally, the more you experience, the more you see, the more memories, the more you can start connecting the dots to put together a visual narrative, to put together a certain design. That's absolutely true, okay? But I regard visual library differently. I do not. I'm going to be very candid with you. I don't have a photographic memory. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. I don't have a visual memory. I don't have a perfect photographic memory. You know, I'm definitely more of a visual person than, you know, I'm better at remembering what I see than what I hear. There's no doubt about that. I am a visual person. I am an artist after all. But I need reference. I'm so sorry. And I need it religiously. I'm so sorry. Yes, that's the truth. And you know what? It's like that for all of us. There's, you know, nobody is some brilliant genius who has this godly memory that remembers every single detail about everything they see every day. Give me a break. You know, that's not true. But what I regard a visual library is keeping yourself open and exposed to anything. It's almost like the law of attraction, right? If you know anything about the law of attraction, the overall, you know, premise of what the law of attraction is if you keep yourself open and very strongly focused on a certain thing, then things come to you that wouldn't normally come to you. You know, if you're like they say, for instance, with finances, if you really want to make money, if that's your real focus and you're passionate about it and you're focused and this is what I'm gonna have, you know, 150,000 by the end of the year, you know, and this is my focus, then if you're really, really focused on it, then opportunities start to arise that normally wouldn't arise, or you'll jump on opportunities that you would have overlooked otherwise because you're open to that particular thing. Now, when it comes to art, it's the same thing. If you're open to growth and artistic exploration and building on your visual narrative and becoming a better artist and really, really, really focusing on that on a regular basis, then your mind and your eyes will catch things that you might have completely overlooked in the past. You know, like a perfect example is a good friend of mine who's a hairdresser. Her name is Elisa. Amazing hairdresser. And she used to live down the street. She ended up moving across Canada, but she used to live a couple of blocks away from me, just downstairs from my sister. And we were sitting down. I've probably told this story in the past. And we're sitting down and she's cutting my daughter's hair. And she's really doing a nice job too. She really knew hair well, you know. And I said, what do you study? You know, because I was just sitting there watching her cut my daughter's hair, so it was a bit boring. I says, where did you study, you know, hairdressing and all of that? And she was a hairdresser / esthetician, and she said, well, I studied here and here. And I said, do you still have any of the old books? Because I'd be very interested to see. And she said, yeah, sure. And she opened a drawer and she pulled out this like book, like it must have weighed half a ton, and she just dropped it on my knees. She almost broke my legs. You know, this huge book. It's kind of like she described it as kind of like the Bible for estheticians, and it covered everything. It covered the biology, it covered the aesthetics, it covered visual design, it covered all of these different facets of hairdressing, makeup, different body types, all of these different things. And I was like, this is golden information. Like learning how to create a hairstyle that balances with the head shape and the shoulder shape, how to create, you know, how to pick clothes or makeup that helps balance a form, you know, understanding different types of head shapes, body shapes, and how to use the tools you have at your disposal to be able to create certain types of looks for different people. That's hugely valuable for character designers. I mean, God, the stuff I learned in that book, it was funny. I was sitting at the cafe down the street with this big book on aesthetics, you know, just sitting there reading through it and everything like that. And I would have women walk by and look at it going, you know, I was getting all this attention from women because they were looking at it going, oh, potential hairdresser, you know, like he's a connection, you know, I might want, all of a sudden I was clicking with a crowd that normally wouldn't even give me the time of day, you know, and people were all of a sudden looking at me going with this interest, you know, like, or people looking at me like, you're into aesthetics, you know, like a ratty looking old artist with his beard, you know, sitting there reading a thing on aesthetics. It's like, okay, I couldn't quite picture him working in that. It was funny, but I so much valuable information came from that. I remember once my landlord, who's also an electrician, he took me downstairs and he was showing me about how to bypass certain wires and stuff like that in my basement. And he was explaining how how you have to consider different types of architecture for where you place wiring and how you set up wiring. And all of a sudden, it opened my brain up to architecture in a way that I never would have thought either, you know. And the artistic brain in me is going, "Oh my God, this is great information for some kind of a visual story, some kind of an illustration, right?" So I was always open. I'm always open and receptive. I'm always ready to grab onto something. And furthermore, if you combine all of that, all of what I've described to you, as far as keeping your mind open to different things, with a quote that I heard from, I think it's Chuck Jones, one of my personal heroes growing up. I love him so much. You know, a great writer, great artist, great role model. And what he describes in one of his books, I think it was called Chuck Amok. It's kind of an autobiography where he's just talking about his life. Very funny writer too, so it's a really good read, and it's full of great cartoons. He writes, there's a quote where he says, "Never underestimate the power of the spontaneous thought." And I've reminded my students, and I remind myself of this on a regular basis. Never underestimate the power of the spontaneous thought. What is a spontaneous thought? A spontaneous thought is an idea. You're hanging out with your buddy, you're joking around, you're walking down the street, sitting at the bus stop, and you see something that catches your eye. Remember it. That, every time some little spark of inspiration hits you, it can so easily disappear. You know, your mind trails off to something else. But what I made a habit of doing, I don't do that so much now because most of my work, I work freelance, so most of my work is in my studio, you know, here at my desk. But when I'm out, if I'm out at a cafe, if I'm out hanging out with friends, if I'm at the park with my kids, whatever I'm doing, I'm always ready to save a thought. Okay? So I'm at the park and some kid's wearing some funny hat on the swing. He's sitting funny on the swings with his ass up in the air, and he face plants into the sand, and it makes everybody giggle, and the kid's laughing, and he's got sand on his face, and he's got sand in his teeth, and I think this is funny. I'll go, oh, I'll make a mental note of it to make it a lucid thought, right? So that it stays in my consciousness. It doesn't just fade away. And that spark of inspiration, whether I write it down or I make a mental note of it, okay, that spontaneous thought is a seed. And when it comes to creative creation, be it visual narration, be it concept art, be it illustration, whatever it is that you're doing, that little mental note you've made for yourself can translate into a very elaborate narrative later on. It can translate into a story. It can translate into an entire gallery, a series of artworks. But it all started with a single seed, that spontaneous thought, right? So you're keeping your mind open and receptive to any source of inspiration. The samurai, like in the movie The Last Samurai, one of the things he describes that I really liked was he said, although war is their art, right? Everything in the samurai world revolves around that one anchor in their life. Being a samurai is who they are, but everything from love to agriculture to home to family, everything revolves around the samurai. So everything has a lesson to teach the warrior. Well, everything in life has a lesson to teach the artist, okay? So always keep yourself open to it, and when something happens that makes you go, oh, that's kind of cool, or wow, I love her gloves, or I love his shoes, or that's a funny scenario, or something that sparks your attention that you feel could translate into a piece of artwork, make a mental note or write it down, if you have a little handy notebook or something like that, you can just write down, kind of give yourself a visual description of what it was. Sometimes I write myself emails when I watch a documentary and something sparks my imagination, right? Or I'm watching a movie and something sparks my imagination. That translates into artwork later on, and that can translate into a very big elaborate thing, but it always started with a little seed. That spontaneous thought is a seed, and if you allow it to grow, it can grow into something quite spectacular, So that's what a visual library is. A visual library is not walking around with a big brain, a big computer brain that retains everything. It's always being open to something and making mental notes of everything that's going on, and furthermore, respecting that spontaneous thought. Because as artists, that is your bread and butter, okay? That's, to me, what a visual library is. But even if I've painted 1,000 deserts or 1,000 forests, I still look up image reference on forests because nature and life is so rich and complex that nobody can remember every fine little detail. It just doesn't work that way. You'll get better at drawing trees naturally by painting them a lot, but you always use reference because you're always growing. So you always need that reference. That visual library is called Google. All right. So hopefully you enjoyed these. Remember, if you're looking for a mentorship, you can. I'll have a link in the description for my private mentorship, LucidPIXUL. But of course, as I mentioned in this talk, in today's Q&A, that do your homework, shop around. If you're going to find an artist that you want to take a mentorship with, if that's what you're in the market for, make sure it's somebody that matches somebody that communicates in a way that you dig, something that really gels with you, somebody you feel you could really learn from and retain stuff from. Okay, so I have my own private mentorship. Remember to like and subscribe. Because of course, the more we spread the word, the happier we will be. And any and all information that you're looking for, just check out the description below. All right, take care.